Hi everyone, my name is Neethi Balur, and welcome to our final Sammamish Teen Science Cafe Science POV series talk. We are so excited to have you and to bring you our final presentation today evening. The Science POV series is aimed at bringing student experts in various science fields to not only talk about what they're passionate about, but also how they explore such interesting avenues of science as a high schooler or college student. We are doing this series virtually, of course, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, so we hope all of you and your families are safe. Today's speaker is Ulain Umar. Ulain is a rising junior at Father Michael McGivney Catholic Academy in Toronto, Canada. She has a strong interest in biology, specifically neuroscience, and she is currently working on a neuroscience research project targeting the issues in mental illness treatment. She's also a member of MEDLIFE, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting underdeveloped communities in Latin America and Africa. In her free time, Ulain loves to play the clarinet and read diverse forms of literature. Her passion for neuroscience is fueled by her drive to make medicine and treatments accessible to all in order to promote socioeconomic equality in the world. So, without further ado, please welcome Ulain.
Hi, my name is Ulain Umar, and I'm honored to be here today to talk about the role of exercise, diet, and lifestyle in relation to mental health. We'll also be going over some extracurricular activities that I've done and how you can become more involved in the scientific community. Now, as for what I'm going to be talking about specifically today, I'm going to start off by talking about the extracurriculars that I've been doing over quarantine. Then I'm going to be talking about mental health and how mental disorders and illnesses are influenced by one's exercise, diet, and lifestyle. Now, I'm also going to be delving into how to find opportunities and strategies on how to implement them. So let's get started with who I am. So I'm a 16-year-old high school student from Toronto, Canada. I'm heavily interested in neuroscience, social justice, and everything pertaining to STEM. So my main area or the field that I want to pursue in the future is neuroscience. However, I also want to have a minor or also study social justice and policy, because those are some other things that I'm very interested in. So let's get into what I've been doing during quarantine. So before quarantine, I honestly wasn't too involved in the scientific community. I was a part of a few clubs at my school, but that was pretty much it. So over this break, I've been taking the initiative to go and find some other opportunities or create some opportunities myself. And so, for example, some of them were like participating in a virtual youth program at my local university. So the program, it was at the University of Toronto, and it was regarding pharmacology and toxicology. I found that a really fun and informative program. I also took an online neuroscience course on the edX platform. There's also Coursera and so many other amazing platforms that you can take courses on just to introduce yourself and familiarize yourself with a concept. I also joined a local nonprofit that helps bring healthcare opportunities to youth, because I feel like a lot of youth aren't aware of the opportunities that are there for them. So I think that's something that I'm passionate about as well. I've also helped fundraise for MedLife, which there's a nonprofit chapter for at my school. And I guess the most relevant to this situation is I began or am co-leading a neuropsychology research project with students internationally. Now, this research project is specifically studying mental illness, and our goal here is to identify issues in the current treatment of manic depression, also known as bipolar disorder, and propose potential solutions. So because we don't have access to a lab, a lot of our research is being done online, looking through articles, databases, and a little bit of working with algorithms and stuff as well to try to propose potential solutions and identify problems as well. This project is with students globally, and so as one of the lead collaborators for this project, my role is to manage the research and oversee communications between researchers and stuff like that. So now let's get into the role of diet, exercise, and lifestyle in relation to mental illness, and basically how we can influence our mental health. Now, as teens, we're often very, very busy, and as a result, we don't prioritize our mental health because there are seemingly more important things to worry about. We have to go to school, do extracurriculars, pick up our siblings for practice, help with chores, study for the upcoming test, and seldom does all of this leave us any time to self-reflect and worry about our mental health. Although you will not be rewarded with a good grade for taking care of yourself, the effects of exercise and lifestyle have a very strong correlation with mental illness, exemplifying the importance of this practice. Although mental illnesses have many different and unique causes, the influence of nutrition and exercise on mental health seems to become more and more evident. Specifically, your lifestyle impacts the etiology, progression, and treatment of mental disorders, and can also potentially prevent them from happening in the first place. This is one of the few treatments without negative side effects, because you are helping your body and not introducing a foreign substance. However, one thing I would like to clarify is that this cause and effect relationships has not necessarily been proven, but scientists are looking into these relationships more and more to see if this is a possibility. However, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that exercise and nutrition are beneficial in general. So I think it's still a viable and a great potential source of treatment in the future. Now, the reason why it's so difficult to see if there is a cause and effect relationship between nutrition, exercise, and mental illness is because there's so many factors that go into why someone is going through a mental illness. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack of different risk factors, most of which can be categorized as either genetic or environmental. So for genetics, an example is like bipolar disorder. The risk for it can be explained 60 to 85% by genetics. But the thing with that is that it's really, really hard to calculate an exact amount because of the fact that most, if not all, mental illnesses are polygenic, which means that more than one gene or many, many different genetic factors go into play. Another potential cause of mental illness is the environment that you're exposed to. So exposure to certain risk factors, which are often psychosocial situations such as trauma, abuse, etc., they can eventually lead to the development of mental illness. Now, the influence of environment in mental illness is also ambiguous, and it doesn't necessarily have to be independent from the role of genetics, because often these two work together to cause mental illness. So for example, you might have a genetic predisposition to a certain mental illness, but it would only begin to appear or become evident once you're introduced to a trigger in your environment. For example, like the psychosocial situations I mentioned, like trauma and abuse, they can act as a trigger for mental illnesses because of your genetics. So how do nutrition and exercise influence our mental health? Well, let's introduce the brain as a plastic system. And no, not that kind of plastic. The brain being a plastic system means that it can change as a result of many environmental factors. Therefore, many lifestyle factors can alter the brain, more specifically its synaptic plasticity and neural connections. This is shown through many studies done on rats. For example, when comparing the brains of rats in an impoverished situation, for example, solitary housing in plain, small cages with minimal ambient stimulation, and when you compare those brains with the brains of rats in an enriched environment, meaning with group housing and large cages with toys, ladders, mazes, and social interactions, these studies show that those in an enriched environment influence not only learning, but the chemical and anatomical structure of the brain. Some of these effects include an increase in the number of synapses and an increased surface area of astrocytes and in the vascularization of the brain. This also results in an overall increase in cortical thickness and therefore an enhanced learning performance. Most of these effects were most pronounced in the brains of young rats, but the environmental stimulation also produced effects in the aging rat brain, but they just were not as apparent. So this chart helps put all of that information into a visual format. So your diet, exercise, and mental challenges that you overcome all contribute to the energy balance in your body, and these are all examples of factors that we can control and influence. So this connects to BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. What this is a protein produced inside nerve cells, and it helps create new neurons and ensures that the current brain cells are in good shape. This protein builds the brain circuits that allow for signals produced by neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, ensuring that these chemicals can be transported throughout the body. This contributes to the brain's synaptic plasticity, which, as aforementioned, has a great impact on mental health. So now let's go into the happy chemicals. So as I mentioned, serotonin and dopamine are very important in the brain's synaptic plasticity and mental health. So these are the 4 happy chemicals that are the most common. They're all hormones, which means they're chemicals produced by different glands in the body. So, however, the 2 that will appear most often in regards to nutrition and exercise are dopamine and serotonin. they are both neurotransmitters, which means they are chemical messengers that transfer signals from cell to cell through synapses. They also, for example, dopamine, it plays a vital role in executive function, so things like planning, motor control, focus. And it's also responsible for how we experience happiness, and too much or too little of it can cause serious problems such as mental illness. And serotonin is known as a mood stabilizer. Other functions it has is regulating memory, sleep, bone health, and blood clotting. It also has a strong link with depression, as with dopamine, too much or too little of it can cause some similar mental illnesses. It's often referred to as a feel-good chemical, and many medications use this as a way of treatment. However, through nutrition and exercise, you can get it naturally instead of through antidepressants. So now we all know that exercise is beneficial. We know that it reduces stress, it helps you feel better, it reduces the risk of mental and physical illnesses, it helps your thinking, learning, and judgment skills. I'm pretty sure we are all familiar with that, but we might not be familiar with how much of an influence it has on mental health. Exercise helps the body produce endorphins, which are hormones that help you relax, minimize discomfort, and give a feeling of pleasure. Endorphins also reduce a stress hormone known as cortisol. Exercise also increases the size of the hippocampus. Now, exercise actually changes the brain's anatomy and physiology. The hippocampus produces new brain cells through exercise by increasing the volume and producing long-term memory. It also improves attention function. And your prefrontal exercise also changes your prefrontal cortex by giving you a long-lasting increase in the happy chemicals that I mentioned. And the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex also get stronger through exercise, which is important because they are the areas of the brain that are most susceptible to neurodegenerative diseases and the effects of aging. Now, in general, the ideal or the minimum amount of exercise that you should get is 3 to 4 times a week for 30 minutes a day. And you should also try to include some form of aerobic exercise into your workouts, such as walking or swimming. So now let's get into the specifics of nutrition. So the processed foods that we consume on a daily basis have way worse of an effect on our bodies than what we might think. Although scientists are still working on finding a cause and effect relationship between nutrition and mental health, it is still evident that optimizing nutrition is a safe and viable way to ensure your mental health is stable, and may eventually become a potential method of treatment for mental illness. Now, poor nutrition is a significant and modifiable risk factor of mental illness, but we must also be aware that the amount of change that we can see as a result of a new diet depends heavily on our genetics. So one person might react better to or have a greater change in their mental health because of their diet, and some person might have a lesser change. This is due to genetics. Now, some examples or some studies that have been done show that eating healthy food has been shown to improve cognitive function. So when they put certain rats on a caloric restricted or CR diet, they ended up having a reduced oxidative stress in their body and therefore less oxidative damage to nucleic acids, lipids, and proteins. The rats, their hippocampal neurons were also much more resistant to degeneration, so that meant that they have better learning and memory. The caloric restricted diet also increased their BDNF levels, which helps reduce oxidative stress. And this diet also helped produce more molecules that promote cell survival. So some of these molecules are the stress proteins, heat shock protein 70, and glucose regulated protein 78. Now, whereas when they gave some rats an HFS diet, which is high in saturated fats and sucrose diet, they actually ended up having decreased levels of BDNF, more difficulty in learning and memory-related tasks, and higher amounts of oxidative stress, the exact opposite of a CR diet. Now, an HFS diet can actually be compared to what we consider junk food, and so it shows that the stuff that we eat on a regular basis and the processed foods that we're used to really do have a great impact on our health, and if they have an impact on our physical health, they also do have a great impact on our mental health. So some examples of nutritious foods or vitamins and how they work in our body are, for example, B vitamins. They help synthesize DNA, and they also produce mood-altering transmitters, so the happy chemicals that I was referring to earlier. And so some examples of where you can get B vitamins from are poultry, whole grains, eggs, and legumes. You can also get vitamin D, which aids in the activation of genes that produce enzymes, and these enzymes produce the neurotransmitters that I was talking about. And so vitamin D, it's not that easy to get it from like food that we're used to, so supplements are a great option. However, you can get them from fatty fish, just salmon and tuna, eggs, and milk. And another example of nutritious vitamins or foods are antioxidants, which prevent oxidative stress, and oxidative stress can be damaging to DNA, so they can help ensure that your DNA does not become damaged. Some examples of where you can get them from are vegetables and fruits. Now let's put all this information together and ask ourselves, what does this all mean? Essentially, a proper diet and consistent exercise become a great way to maintain your physical and mental health. This could eventually become a form of treatment for mental illness and a preventative measure you can implement right now. So for exercise, I recommend 3 to 4 times per week for 30 minutes. This can be something as simple as going to walk your dog in the morning or playing Just Dance for half an hour. It can be just small tasks that you do or small things that you incorporate into your daily life that could have a big impact in the long run. As for diet, have plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean meat, and try to incorporate all 4 food groups into your 3 daily meals. So now let's get on to how to become more involved in your community. So for me, I think that there's 2 main components to becoming more involved or finding great opportunities for extracurricular activities. The first component is mindset, and the second component is strategies. So for mindset, you must have a passion to do what you're doing. I know it's said a lot, but you really won't get too far with anything if it's not something you enjoy and it's not something that you genuinely want to do. If you're doing an activity for the sake of putting it on your college application or for the sake of adding it to your resume, there's no point in doing it. It's most admission officers or people who are looking at your resume, they can normally see through those types of activities. So do stuff that actually aligns with your passions and your values. And secondly, ask yourself if you're willing to commit your time and effort to this activity, because you might enjoy it, but do you have too much on your schedule right now? Or do you think that this is something that will be worthwhile? You have to ask yourself these difficult questions in order to assess whether or not this opportunity is for you. And the second component, strategies. So for me, before quarantine, as I said, I wasn't very involved. But one thing that I found really, really helpful, especially as everybody's slowly starting to shift to things online, is networking. So I found Slack channels online, and I made a LinkedIn account recently, and like being able to connect with people through that, finding organizations, talking to new people, all that stuff goes under networking, and it's such a great way to find new opportunities. Like even reaching out to people on Instagram or Twitter or wherever, it could really, really prove helpful in the future. For me, I also tried the buddy system, and it worked really well for me. So what it meant was finding a friend who was in my area, or just someone in my area who has similar interests as me. And so we could like bounce opportunities off of one another, say, hey, have you heard about this club, or have you heard about this organization, or maybe we could try this or something like that. I think that would be really helpful, because now you have twice the people or twice the amount of brain power going towards finding opportunities. And if those opportunities aren't there, make your own. Like it's not too difficult in the digital age to create your opportunities. You could start a COVID-19 fundraiser. You could make a jewelry company. There's thousands upon thousands of possibilities. You just have to have the initiative, the drive, and the passion to do it. And again, just emphasizing, make sure that you have the right mindset, because even if you implement all these strategies and you do whatever you can to find opportunities, if you don't like what you're doing and if you're just doing it for the sake of impressing someone else, you're not going to be able to create a true impact, and you're not going to be able to truly succeed in what you're doing. Another thing for me was overcoming this fear of disappointment or this fear of failure. So constantly being scared of, oh, what if I go out for this club and they won't accept me? Or what if I try this and I fail? Or what will people think what if, like, any sort of pressure or things like that, you really do have to overcome that. You have to be confident in yourself. Remind yourself, hey, if I don't get into this, or if I don't make this team, or if I don't get into this club, it's not the end of the world. I can try again, I can improve myself, and I can work towards reaching that goal. So thank you guys for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed. Bye!
Thank you so much, Ulain, for that insightful and inspiring presentation. We truly enjoyed learning about the brain, mental health, and the variety of opportunities for high schoolers passionate about STEM during this pandemic. Like Ulain mentioned, if you have any questions for her or just want to reach out, be sure to reach out on her social media. Or you can email us your questions at samamishtscn@outlook.com or DM us on our Instagram at samamishtscn. And we would be happy to connect with you. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We truly hope you enjoyed this final talk in a huge series that we had this summer. As the series comes to an end, we highly encourage you to stay in contact with our organization, as we have normal cafes on our Zoom that are resuming in September that happen once a month. You can stay up to date with us on our Instagram and be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel for more information. Thank you all once again, and stay safe.